In the scorching desert of North Africa in 1942, German reconnaissance pilots looked down from their aircraft and saw exactly what they expected to see. Rows of British tanks assembled in the south, supply dumps growing larger by the day, a fake water pipeline stretching toward the front lines, artillery batteries and hundreds of Allied aircraft ready for action. But there was a problem with everything the Germans were seeing. Almost none of it was real. This is the story of Operation Bertram, the largest military deception ever attempted up to that point in history. How British filmmakers and engineers created an entire phantom army in the Egyptian desert. How they convinced Field Marshal Erwin Rommel to prepare for a battle that would never come from the direction he expected. And how this elaborate illusion helped change the course of the Second World War. When Italy entered World War II in June 1940, Britain faced an immediate crisis in North Africa. Over 500,000 Italian soldiers threatened the vital Suez Canal, Britain's lifeline to India and the Far East. Against this massive force, British General Archibald Wavell had fewer than 100,000 troops to defend Egypt. In February 1941, everything got worse. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox, arrived in North Africa and transformed the Axis forces into a formidable fighting machine. By summer 1942, Rommel had pushed the British back to El Alamein, just 60 miles from Alexandria. If the British line broke here, nothing stood between Rommel and the Suez Canal. The architect of Britain's solution was Brigadier Dudley Clarke. In March 1941, Clarke's organization was officially designated a force, a deliberately vague name for a unit dedicated to strategic deception. Clarke set up headquarters in Cairo in a building that also housed a brothel. The location itself was a form of deception. Staff officers wouldn't think to look for a military intelligence unit in such a place. But Clarke needed more than intelligence officers. To create convincing physical deceptions in the desert, he needed artists, craftsmen, and people who understood how things appeared from the air. He needed a film production crew. Geoffrey Barkas was the perfect man. A British filmmaker who had directed 14 films and a World War I veteran decorated at the Somme, Barkas was appointed Director of Camouflage for Middle East Command in November 1941. His staff included painters, sculptors, architects, theater designers, and film set builders. The unit also briefly included Jasper Maskelyne, a stage magician who later wrote a book claiming credit for extraordinary achievements. However, official records suggest his contribution was more limited, and by February 1942, he was transferred to entertaining troops with magic shows. The British learned from smaller experiments first. At Tobruk, they made a crucial water plant appear destroyed when it was still functioning. At Meshifa, they built a fake railway complete with dummy trains and tanks. More than 100 German bombs were dropped on this fake target, protecting the real supply depot at Capuzzo. In August 1942, Winston Churchill appointed Lieutenant General Bernard Montgomery to command the 8th Army. Montgomery quickly recognized that defeating Rommel would require deception on an unprecedented scale. On September 16th, Montgomery's chief of staff summoned Barkas to headquarters with an audacious plan. Montgomery would attack on October 23rd along the Northern Coast Road. But through elaborate deception, he wanted Rommel to believe the attack would come in the south and wouldn't be ready until 2 weeks later. Montgomery ordered them to create an entire fake armored corps in the south while hiding the real buildup in the north. They had just 5 weeks to pull it off. The most ingenious element was the Sunshield, a device that made tanks look like trucks from the air. The Sunshield was a light wooden and canvas frame that hinged on the sides of a tank. Each half weighed only 30 pounds and could be fitted in minutes. From reconnaissance altitude, they were completely convincing. 722 Sunshields were manufactured for Operation Bertram. Different models fit different tank types, all painted to mimic common military trucks. While real forces were hidden in the north, An entire fake army was created in the South. Dummy tanks were built from wood frames and painted canvas. Dummy supply dumps gradually grew in size. Most elaborate was a fake water pipeline made from empty gasoline cans half buried in the sand, deliberately scheduled to be completed by November 6th, 2 weeks after the real attack date. The most challenging task was hiding X-Corps' 2 armored divisions assembling at a location codenamed Martello. The solution was counterintuitive. They filled Martello with trucks and dummy vehicles weeks early. German reconnaissance would notice it, but seeing no changes would dismiss it as unimportant. The real tanks stayed concealed further back. On the night of October 20th, just 2 days before the attack, they moved into Martello under darkness. By dawn, all were in position disguised as trucks. Dummy tanks replaced them in their old positions, complete with fake radio traffic. Operation Bertram even included a double bluff. In the southern sector, dummy artillery was positioned starting October 15th, but deliberately camouflaged poorly over several days. The Germans would think they'd spotted the fakes and dismissed the southern sector. Then on battle night, these dummies were secretly replaced with real artillery. When German armor probed the area expecting harmless decoys, they were shocked to face massed, genuine artillery. By October 18th, the Royal Air Force had established complete air superiority. German reconnaissance aircraft were intercepted and driven off. The few photographs Germans obtained showed exactly what Operation Bertram wanted them to see. Tony Ayrton, Barkas's deputy, worked tirelessly to maintain every detail. A dust storm hit mid-October, threatening to expose the deceptions. Ayrton's team worked around the clock to restore everything. He personally flew reconnaissance missions, photographing British positions from a German pilot's perspective to check for anything suspicious. On October 23rd, Operation Bertram added one final touch. Fast motor torpedo boats with loudspeakers played recordings of amphibious assault sounds behind German lines, making them think they were being outflanked by a seaborne invasion. At 9:40 p.m. on October 23rd, over 1,000 Allied guns opened fire simultaneously. The barrage shook the ground for miles. Behind it, Allied infantry advanced through Axis minefields. The attack came exactly where Operation Bertram said it wouldn't be, from the north along the coast road, 2 weeks earlier than German intelligence expected. Field Marshal Rommel wasn't even present. Suffering from illness, he'd returned to Germany on medical leave September 23rd. On October 3rd, he was presented with his Field Marshal's baton in Berlin, declaring he stood at the gateway to Egypt with no intention of being pushed back. The fact he felt comfortable leaving suggests he believed the British weren't ready to attack. The German commander in Rommel's absence was General Georg Stumme. On the night the battle opened, Stumme went forward on reconnaissance toward British lines. In the opening barrage, his signals officer was killed and Stumme suffered a fatal heart attack. The German command collapsed into chaos. Rommel wasn't recalled until October 25th, 2 days into the battle. By then, British forces had achieved their initial objectives and German defenses were in disarray. The evidence suggests Operation Bertram succeeded beyond expectations. German armor was divided between North and South, unusual for Rommel, who normally massed his forces. This suggests Germans genuinely believed attacks might come from either direction. Captured German documents after the war revealed Axis intelligence had accepted most of the fictional information, believing British forces were in different locations and not ready to attack when they actually were. On November 11, 1942, Winston Churchill praised the deception directly in Parliament. By a marvelous system of camouflage, complete tactical surprise was achieved in the desert. The Battle of El Alamein lasted until November 4th. The Allies achieved decisive victory, forcing Rommel into long retreat across North Africa. It marked the first major land victory for British forces against Germany and became a turning point in the war. As Churchill famously said, "Before Alamein, we never had a victory. After Alamein, we never had a defeat." Operation Bertram demonstrated that large-scale military deception could work against a sophisticated enemy. The techniques developed became the blueprint for Operation Fortitude, the massive deception preceding D-Day landings in 1944, which used inflatable tanks, fake radio traffic, and double agents to convince Germans the invasion would come at Pas de Calais rather than Normandy. Geoffrey Barkas returned to filmmaking after the war, making children's films. He died in 1979. Dudley Clarke continued organizing deception operations until war's end, then lived in relative obscurity. He died in London in 1974. Tony Ayrton died in April 1943, less than a year after the battle. His enormous contribution is often overlooked. Throughout the North Africa campaign, a force implemented Operation Cascade, creating entire fictional divisions and brigades that existed only on paper. German intelligence tracked these phantom formations throughout the war, never realizing they didn't exist. Dummy airfields with fake aircraft were bombed repeatedly. The Germans wasted ordnance and flying hours on targets of zero military value. Operation Bertram succeeded because it understood a fundamental truth. Battles are fought first in the minds of commanders. If you can control what your enemy believes, you can control what he does. Rommel was outfought at El Alamein, but he was first outthought. The battle was lost in his headquarters, where German intelligence officers studied photographs that told a convincing but entirely false story. The ghost squadrons of the desert were never real. The hundreds of tanks in the south, the growing supply dumps, the water pipeline, the artillery batteries existed only as plywood, canvas, and empty fuel cans arranged to deceive cameras thousands of feet overhead. But their impact was entirely real. Operation Bertram helped win one of World War II's most important battles, shortened the North African campaign, and likely saved thousands of lives by bringing the Desert War to a swifter conclusion. In the harsh light of the Egyptian desert, where nothing could truly hide, the British masters of camouflage performed perhaps their greatest magic trick. They made an entire army disappear and another army appear where it never was. The ghosts fooled the desert fox, and in doing so they helped change the course of history.